At the university, a guy calls Chay Jun. But there's no answer. He tells Jun about it and asks if they should just give up on the idea. Jun insists that he really needs the best grade for their project. He mentions that they study in the same faculty and asks if he happens to know where Chay Jun lives. Group projects are something you can't escape at university. Maybe even a form of torture invented by the devil himself. Jun rings the doorbell. Despite a note on it saying not to press it, Chay Jun is surprised to see Jun outside his apartment and asks how he found out where he lives. Jun says he already explained that there was a misunderstanding back then and that he's here to help. Chay Jun starts closing the door and tells him to leave, irritated by people who can't even listen. Jun stops the door from shutting and asks if he's really just going to walk away. He argues that if Chay Jun doesn't participate, his assignment will fail. He asks if Chay Jun even understands the point of a group project and offers to help if there's a problem. Chay Jun scoffs, questioning why Jun is wasting his precious vacation time on such nonsense. He wonders why he even has to deal with this lunatic. In reality, Jun wanted to take his studies seriously. But with his grades, a scholarship was out of reach. He started spending more time working part-time, mostly in the evenings. The pay was decent, but his grades suffered. Of course, he hadn't put in much effort last semester anyway. After the army, he decided to push himself and raise his GPA. In the end, he made significant progress. If everything had gone smoothly 3 weeks ago, his GPA would have been fine. The metro was packed with people. Jun wonders if there's a concert nearby and thinks he should have moved his backpack to the front. Inside the train, the crowd pushes Jun too close to another guy, none other than Chay Jun. Back then, Chay Jun had been dozing off but suddenly woke up. Jun felt like he had misunderstood the situation and quickly apologized. However, after they got off the train, Chay Jun reported to the police that Jun had harassed him. And the officers asked him to come with them. As the police took him away, all Jun could think about was what would happen to their presentation. At the station, an officer looked at Jun and said he was surprised to see him after all these years. When he realized Jun was his friend's brother, he couldn't believe it. Jokingly, he commented that it was a strange place for a reunion. After the questioning, the officer told Jun he was free to go. Witness statements matched, and security footage confirmed that it was all a misunderstanding. The officer then noticed that Chay Jun kept getting calls. He mentioned that all that was left was to sign some paperwork and that Chay Jun could answer if it was urgent. Chay Jun read a message saying they had received a terrible grade because of him. He started crying. The officer asked what was wrong, but Chay Jun simply said it was nothing. The next day, Jun arrived at the university wearing glasses and a dress shirt. Kiona groaned and said she really didn't need to see something like that at 9 a.m. on the first day of the semester. She asked if he dressed that way on purpose just to avoid standing out to the professor. Jun hesitated but asked, "What if he notices me?" He explained that he absolutely needed a good grade. He then asked Kiona if she already got hers and why she was even there again. She replied that she got an F due to absences. Kiona then asked if he was really not going to explain why he missed that day. Especially considering how hard he had worked all semester. John wondered how she even knew he missed the presentation because of some guy who mistook him for someone else. He thought the guy must have been terrified. And honestly, he would have reported it too. He just wanted to forget about it and focus on his studies. He had put all his money into this course and couldn't afford to get anything lower than an A. Determined, he became the group leader. As he scanned the participant list, he saw Chay Jun's name, but he was nowhere to be found. John asked if Chay Jun was going to show up. A guy named Don Menem replied that they did study together. But honestly, it would be better without him. John asked why and mentioned that the professor didn't like students who skipped class. Don Menem says that Chun missed the entire last semester and probably won't show up. John decides to inform the professor. The professor tells them to do whatever they want but says they still need to bring Chun in. John points out that since the professor is on a business trip and classes won't start for another week, they should have enough time to convince him. He then asks if Chun even answers calls. Don Menem dials Chun's number. Meanwhile, Chun is in the workshop. A guy asks why he's wandering around again and whether his legs are too weak for a man. He adds that Chun might end up breaking something. Another guy jokes that if that happens, they'll have to break the bed in the lounge too. He complains that the lounge stinks because of Chun, while the other guy groans, saying he asked him not to bring that up. One of them warns Chun not to forget that he's talking to a senior and asks if he thinks the professor's favoritism means he can do whatever he wants. Another guy tells them to stop fighting and focus on working. Chun remembers the incident on the metro and wonders if he actually got any sleep because of John. Suddenly, he hears his phone ringing and sees that it's Don Menem. John realizes there's no way around this, though he figures it probably won't be worse than the police station. He asks Don Menem if he could at least give him Chun's contact information. But for 3 days, Chun doesn't answer his calls. When he finally does, the first thing he says is that he isn't buying anything. John thinks this is ridiculous. Does he really think he can outplay him? They'll see who wins in the end. It's 7:32 p.m. and Chun still hasn't responded for 4 days now. John thinks he can't just sit around and wait. He goes to the art faculty. Coming here is a bold move. He drank so much water on the way up that at this point, he doesn't even care about Chun anymore. He just needs to find a bathroom. But as soon as he enters the building, he immediately runs into Chun. They've only seen each other in the metro before, but they recognize each other instantly. John says that Chun misunderstood him back then. And, by the way, he never expected them to go to the same university. Chun glares at him. Because of you, I can't sleep properly anymore. John thinks it's best to avoid this lunatic. He says he's just looking for Chun, and once he finds him, he'll leave right away. He hopes they won't meet again. Suddenly, Chun pushes him against the wall. John is stunned. What kind of nonsense is this? Where did Chun get so much strength? Chay Jun leans in closer, and John tells him to take his hands off. Just then, someone calls out for Chun. John quickly scans the area. He can't let Chun get away now. Out of nowhere, another guy walks up and shoves Chun away from John. I told you not to do anything stupid. He scolds. I even sent you to the lounge because of this. John realizes that this guy is actually talking to Chun. The guy turns to John and introduces himself as the senior representative of the third-year design faculty. He apologizes on Chay Jun's behalf. John brushes it off. There's no need. I'm fine. The guy sighs. I understand that this kind of behavior can be really frightening. But please, don't report this to the department. If word gets out, our workshop might get shut down early. And we won't finish our project in time. He promises to make Chun apologize later and explains that Chun isn't in the right state of mind right now. Chun suffers from severe insomnia. He continues. When he's completely exhausted, things get really bad. A few weeks ago, he was doing better, but now it's happening again. He refuses to rest, and we have to make sure he sleeps, no matter what. John raises an eyebrow. If the workshop gets shut down, will that affect Chay Jun? It'll hit him the hardest. The guy admits. He practically lives there. John smirks. In that case, don't worry. I won't cause any problems. But I have one condition. He pauses before declaring. Hand over Chun to me. When they do, Chun immediately refuses to work with him. John follows after him, insisting that he has no choice. Chun scoffs. Would you even work with someone who harassed him? John tells him to stop exaggerating. He asks why Chun even enrolled in this course in the first place. If it's part of his major, he had to know it involved a group project. Does he enjoy wasting money? Suddenly, John hears a familiar voice, a troublesome client of his. Someone who clearly isn't friendly toward Chun. Realizing the guy is heading their way, John shoves Chun and the other guy into a storage room and quickly hides inside with them. Stay quiet, he begs Chun. The space is cramped, and to make things worse, someone locks the door from the outside. An hour passes. The storage room is unbearably hot. John assumes it's evening by now and that everyone has probably left. He just hopes he won't be late for work. The air is getting thick. His phone won't turn on. And passing out here would be the worst-case scenario. There's barely enough space to move. He looks at Chun, hoping he's still alive. John asks, "Are you okay? Having trouble breathing?" Chun sighs. "Do I really have to answer?" John really wants to punch him. Sitting still is unbearable. He figures he should help Chun, after all. They're both guys, so there's nothing to be embarrassed about. As he helps him, Chun dozes off. Just then, someone approaches the storage room. "Is the door stuck again?" they ask while trying to open it. John absolutely does not want to get caught. The moment the door opens, he rushes out with his shirt covering his face and bolts straight for the exit without stopping. Meanwhile, the others try to wake Chun up. John just hopes he never has to see him again. The day before classes start, John wonders if he should swallow his pride and apologize. Maybe he overreacted. Maybe he shouldn't have threatened Chun. Even though Chun didn't consider him a good person. John knows about his severe insomnia. But back there, Chun actually fell asleep. Was it all just an act? He needs to think back to that day. Still, Chun doesn't answer his calls. Classes start tomorrow, and nothing is going according to plan. So, John shows up at Chun's place. Chun refuses to let him in, but John stands his ground. Frustrated, he pushes Chun, and they both end up falling onto the floor in the hallway. Chun glares at him. How many times do I have to tell you to leave? Yet, John still keeps talking about that stupid project. Chun, now on top of John, scowls. John groans. You're crushing me. Why are you always so on edge? John asks. Just talk to me. I'll help however I can. Chun hesitates. Ever since we started crossing paths, weird things keep happening to me. Is the project just an excuse? John sighs. I need high grades. I'm just trying to reach my goal. Is that such a bad thing? Chun studies him. Is it really just about the project? John notices something is off about him again. You didn't sleep this time either. Did you? Chun scoffs. What makes you think that? Now get out. John sighs. Fine. But in that case, I'll be back in the morning. Just don't die. He steps outside, but immediately turns back. What if he really does die? He can't just walk away. Chun doesn't want to do the group project. He doesn't want to see a doctor either. He has no interest in any of this. But back in the storage room, he fell asleep right after exhausting himself. Maybe it's worth a try. Who knows? It might work. The next morning, when John wakes up, he can't even remember the last time he felt this rested. Then he suddenly notices Chun is sleeping on top of him. A strange feeling washes over him, like he's forgotten something important. He recalls everything that happened with Chun, and realizes he's wearing clothes that aren't his. He looks at Chun, who, for once, looks peaceful, kind of cute. Actually, John catches a familiar scent, the same one he noticed yesterday. Then Chun stirs, slowly waking up. Their eyes meet. Chun freezes, his expression shifting from groggy confusion to complete shock and fear. John blinks. Wait, aren't I the one who should be reacting that way? Then it hits him. They have class today. What time is it? He shouts. Scrambling up. We're late. John shot up in bed. Panicked. Shit. What time is it? He frantically searched his pockets for his phone, only to remember it had died yesterday. Chun was still groggy, staring at him as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. What are you looking at? I didn't eat you or anything. John grumbled, feeling just as confused. Chun suddenly sat up straight. What are you doing here? John frowned. Shouldn't I be asking you that? Since when have I been sleeping here? And he gestured to his clothes. This isn't mine. Chun stared at him for a long moment before turning away. His face slightly flushed. You changed in the middle of the night. John nearly choked. What? I mean, Chun scratched his head. You kept tossing and turning, mumbling about how hot it was. I handed you a shirt, and you just grabbed it and put it on. And your pants. He trailed off. John felt a chill run down his spine. My pants what? Chun cleared his throat. You changed by yourself. Nothing to do with me. John froze for a few seconds before deciding it was best not to think too hard about it. He rushed out of the room to find a clock. And when he saw the time, shit, class starts in 20 minutes. He hurriedly put on his shoes and grabbed his bag. Then suddenly realized Chun was still sitting there, completely dazed. Come on. We can't be late. But Chun didn't move. He was staring down at his hands, looking puzzled. I slept? John blinked. What? Chun looked up at him. I actually slept? This time, John was just as shocked. Chun had severe insomnia. Everyone in their department knew about it. But last night, he had slept straight through until morning. Seems like it, John muttered. Chun seemed to be trying to process it. Then let out a small, almost disbelieving laugh. Ha! First time in years. John studied him for a moment before chuckling. Good for you. But right now, we really need to run. Or we'll both lose our attendance points. Chun shot him a look but finally got up. Fine. And so, the two of them dashed to campus, neither of them fully understanding what had just begun between them. He thinks he's lucky that it was close by and that he didn't even end up late. But he still doesn't understand why Chun is following him around. That was the goal, of course. But Chun just obediently followed him without any resistance. He finds Chun incredibly inconsistent. Everyone is shocked that Sinjin actually brought Jun. Even the professor thanks him for it. Sinjin thinks that if the professor supports Jun, then maybe just having him on the team will give him a solid advantage. Chun asks if Sinjin really has nothing better to do, saying he must be free if he's following him around like a stalker. Sinjin wonders why the professor favors this lunatic and if he has vision problems. He tells Chun that he got fired. So now he really doesn't have anything else to do. Still, it seems like Chun is actually useful. Which means he'll have to stick around. He thinks that, in some ways, Chun is pretty high maintenance. But at his core, he doesn't seem like a bad person. He tells him that things feel easier with him around and that it'd be much better if he came again tomorrow. Chun agrees and asks what their project topic is. Sinjin asks if he's really going to show up and jokes that maybe he should record him saying that. He promises to take care of everything and help however he can. He notices that the dark circles under Chun's eyes have gotten lighter. Sinjin asks how long it's been since he last slept properly. Chun says he doesn't remember and is also curious why he's reacting this way. Sinjin asks if it could be from exhaustion. Sinjin says he can help. He knows what it's like since he also struggles with insomnia after working night shifts. He asks if Jun wants to try finding a way to fix it together. He says that either way, there's nothing to lose. He tells him not to overthink it. But Chun asks if he's really that caring. Sinjin asks if he wants to start a fight. He says that if he agrees, then it's time to go and unwind. They get on public transport. And Chun asks if this is his idea of relaxation. Chun asks where they're even going. Sinjin says he wants to go for a run. It's a great way to relax. There's a nice spot near his place. Sinjin tells him to keep himself together and says they'll be getting off soon. In the end, they skip the run and head straight to Sinjin's place. Somehow, they break the divider between their two apartments. Jun shrugs, saying he needed renovations anyway, and asks if Chun has a place to stay. They decide to form a mutually beneficial arrangement. They make a deal. Chun lets Jun live there for free. And in exchange, Chun promises to study properly and get an A+ for the summer semester. No matter who's right, Jun is grateful for the help with moving in. But now, it's time to get to the real point. He has a lot of things he wants to know. He asks Chun what's constantly bothering him. Chun says he's curious about the source of that scent and asks what cologne he uses. Jun looks confused. I have no idea what you're talking about. Chun reminds him that at first, Chun complained that he smelled like sweat. But now he's asking about cologne, even though he's never used any. Chun wonders if it could be his shower gel, shampoo, or lotion. He wants to know where that scent came from. The one he smelled in the metro and in the storage room. Jun says this is starting to feel like an old-fashioned pickup line. Then it hits him. Chun might actually like him. And then, Chun straight up asks him to sell that fragrance to him. After thinking it over carefully, Jun realizes it's true. Chun really does like him. But now what is he supposed to do? He never even considered this possibility. At the cafeteria, Jun says he finally understands why the professor holds on to Chun so tightly. He's probably trying to push him somewhere. He notices Kiona and asks what she's doing there since she's on a different team. She greets them and says she came to plagiarize. Then she asks if they heard about the guy who didn't get an A+ yesterday and got so upset that he had a nervous breakdown. They start chatting, and Jun comments that extroverts always drain his energy. He suggests to Chun that they head home. He tells Chun to finish his cake in 3 minutes, warning that if he throws it away, he'll go to hell and choke on it along with his coffee. A week has passed since Jun started living with Chun. Surprisingly, Chun turned out to be the perfect roommate. Jun even got used to how close they had become. Strangely enough, Chun hasn't touched him since. Jun hopes everything will stay fine. One day, Chun takes one of his shampoos. It seems really odd. Chun still struggles to fall asleep. Why torture himself with sports when there's an easier way? Then, the same guy who dislikes Jun notices him with Jun. He thinks they make the perfect duo. At home, Jun tells Jun not to wash dark clothes with his or they'll get stained. He then asks why Chun only wears black. Suddenly, Chun says he overreacted back then and apologizes. Chun asks which incident he's talking about. Chun says he means that time in the metro when they got pushed together. SJ tells him not to dwell on it but thanks him anyway. Jun thinks, so he has a soft side after all. He then asks if Chun lashed out because of sleep deprivation and how long he had gone without sleep back then. Chun says it had been 2 weeks. Chun asks if that's even humanly possible. Meanwhile, SJ's group is getting nervous. Their presentation is tomorrow. An brings snacks, and they all wait for Chun to arrive. When the group steps out of the classroom for a bit, they notice a stranger leaving. SJN immediately checks his laptop, but it's still locked. He figures the guy must have just forgotten something and came back for it. The day of the group presentation arrives. Chun asks if Shon is nervous. And he admits that, of course, he is. One grade could change his entire GPA. It's only the second time in his life he's put in this much effort. He promises Chay Jun that if they get an A he'll buy him a meal. During another team's presentation, Shon realizes they've copied their project, down to the smallest details. He wonders if that guy who was in their classroom actually stole their work. If he reports the plagiarism, it could turn into a scandal. Will the professor even bother figuring out who's right? Both groups might get penalized. He tries to stay calm. There's nothing they can do now. First, they need to present. But then what? What if the conflict doesn't get resolved? What if the professor refuses to investigate? Why does he always have to deal with so many problems? He bites his fingers nervously. And Chun offers him his hand instead. Sinjin apologizes for the habit and says he's stepping out for a moment. He goes to the bathroom and splashes water on his face, trying to calm himself down. Old memories start surfacing in his mind. He remembers that the professor favors Chun. Maybe he could ask him to back them up. But the thought makes him uncomfortable. Chun walks in and asks if he's planning to ruin everything. Shon tells him to just leave and says that if it weren't for him, he wouldn't even have to be taking some of these courses. He also asks if he could at least try to be a little polite. Chun suggests they go back. But Shon tells him to do whatever he wants. He needs time to think. Chun grabs his wrist. But Shon tells him to let go. When he doesn't, Shon loses patience and punches him. Shon asks himself if he should be ashamed for taking out his frustration on the poor guy. He apologizes, asks if Chun is okay, and tells him to show where it hurts. Chun says it's fine. Shon insists he needs to check, saying he hit him pretty hard. Chun repeats that it doesn't hurt. Shon knows he's lying. Shon suggests they go back, saying that with Chun there, maybe he can at least get a B. Chun asks what he means. Wasn't he aiming for an A? Shon says, of course, but asks if he didn't see the last team's presentation. He explains that even if they prove it was plagiarized, it'll turn into a messy fight. And who will step in? It's just a summer course. If both teams are involved, then both will get punished. No matter how hard he tries. There's no way to fix this. Shon admits that, honestly, he's not even sure about getting a B. But if Chun is here, he can at least hope for the best. Chun asks if he took something. Shon asks if that's supposed to be polite. Chun says jumping to conclusions isn't really his style. Shon asks, what is your style, then? Chun thought he'd do anything for a good grade. He asks where that stupid fighting spirit went. He says he's never seen someone so obsessed with their goal. With enthusiasm like that, he could overcome any obstacle. So he needs to stop throwing a fit. He says that since Shon dragged him into this, he shouldn't give up now. Shon laughs and asks what kind of nonsense he's saying. He asks if it's really that hard to try something new. Then he thanks Chun for the support. He asks if they're on the same side now. Does that mean he should fully back him from this moment on? Chun asks if he has a split personality or something. Shon walks out of the bathroom, determined to fix this mess. He heads off in another direction. And Chun points out that the classroom is the other way. The third group begins their presentation. An asks if they're really not going to make any changes to theirs. Shon tells her not to worry and says she'll do just fine either way. He promises to make them believe that their version is the original. During the presentation, he watches the professor and the audience's reactions carefully. His anxiety is through the roof. Chun once again offers his hand for Shon to bite. But Shon pushes him away and asks if he's lost his mind. Chun says he thought he was looking for something to chew on. He grabs Shon's hands and tells him to stop gnawing on them. Shon sighs, says he gets it, and asks him to let go. Shon swears he's going to destroy those idiots. He has nothing to lose. He finishes the presentation and asks if there are any questions. Suddenly, the professor raises his hand and says their presentation is strikingly similar to the previous team's work. After all the presentations are over, the professor asks them to explain everything. The leader of the second group stands up and claims there's nothing to explain. It's clear that Shon's team plagiarized their work. He says they have no shame and just copied them. Shon stands at the podium and says that, actually, it was their work that was stolen. He points out that the second group didn't cite a single source. While his team can provide a full list right now, the other guy says he left them out on purpose but can show them if needed. Shon asks if they even remember where they got their images from. He pulls up one of the photos and asks where it came from. The guy shrugs. No big deal. It's from the National Museum's artifact hall. Shon turns to Chun. Since when did you ever go there? Then he asks the second group. Are you seriously claiming that my teammate Chun's handcrafted work is a national treasure? He thanks them on Chun's behalf and says that kind of craftsmanship is produced in the furniture design department. The guy insists they just found the picture online and asks how they can prove Chun made it. Shon smirks. That particular photo was never posted online. Would you like to confirm? He tells An to zoom in on the original. He asks her to focus on the mirror's reflection in the photo. There, clear as day, they can see Chun and the professor. The professor suddenly remembers where he's seen that piece before. He recalls that Chun once came to his house for advice. He was just a first year back then. It was the first time he'd seen such a hard-working student. Which is why he remembered him. Now that the situation is clear, he tells the second group to stay behind and asks the fourth group to begin. After the presentation, Shon and Chun sit at home, drinking beer. Shon sighs. I absolutely love that professor. I used to think he was just some dumb old man. But it turns out I was wrong. Chun smirks. Don't forget who gave you the photo in the first place. Shon asks how he even managed to attach his own work as reference material for the project. He says Chun could have at least talked to him about it first. Chun shrugs. There was no point. It was just to fill a page. Shon thanks him anyway. Shon asks how much beer he has left. Chun says more than half and tells him to stop drinking. Shon grins. If I don't finish it now, I'll have bad luck for a whole year. They quickly chug another can. Shon realizes he definitely went overboard and asks if Chun has any weird superstitions too. Chun raises an eyebrow. What do you mean? Shon explains. Like if you don't cross the street within 3 seconds, you'll have bad luck all day. Or if you don't wake up exactly at 7 a.m., nothing will go your way. He chuckles. I have tons of these little beliefs. And if I don't get the GPA I want, I'll be a loser for life. He admits he never expected Chun, of all people, to help him break out of this crisis. Chun frowns. Since when have you even been in a crisis? Shon sighs. Since I got my first A after coming back from the army. He leans back. You provoked me last time too. I hate being told what to do. It instantly puts me on edge. He exhales sharply. It might be obvious, but I have a bit of a competitive streak. I wanted to dedicate my life to sports. But I quit because I turned out to be a pathetic failure. Chun asks what he means by that. Shon shakes his head. Not gonna explain. Chun gives him a look. Shon insists. It's nothing serious. I trained without my parents' permission. But they caught me, and my plan fell apart. Chun smirks. Didn't you just say you weren't going to explain? Shon groans. Because the reason is dumb. Chun shrugs. You could have just not told me. Then, Shon exhales. On the last day to submit my application, there was an incident at a computer club. He pauses. I worked so hard, but in a single moment of anger, I lost my chance. That day, he got badly beaten. No one even bothered to hear his side of the story. The hospital bills and compensation were expensive. His university application was reset. After so many failures, he started wondering if something would always get in his way. Sometimes, he says, I feel completely powerless against circumstances. And that's a terrible feeling. That's why his first day felt like a second chance. He thought that if he just tried a little harder, he could prove to himself that he was worth something. Getting a good job requires high grades. He glances at his beer can. And alcohol is practically calling my name. Chun agrees that losing control is terrifying. Shon glances at him. Are you seriously drunk off one can? He tells him to check where he hit him. There's already a bruise forming. Chun barely responds. And Shon jokes. Maybe I should get you drunk more often. He looks closer and realizes there really is a bruise. But Chun insists it doesn't hurt. Shon frowns. How is that even possible? I've heard that rubbing a bruise makes it fade faster. He pauses. Wait, there's one under your eye too. Chun scowls. Stop it already. Shon tilts his head. Are you even drunk enough to recognize me right now? Chun groans. Idiot. Then mutters. Fetishist. Shon snickers. If you're listing my worst qualities, you might as well add room destroyer to the list. Or did you already forget about that? Chun scoffs. That's not true. He shrugs. I go to university, do my projects, and listen to everything you say. Shon narrows his eyes. What's with that face? You know what? He leans in. I should just punch you again. Instead, he kisses him. He pulls away. Expression unreadable. Wanted to see if I could kiss a guy. A pause. Turns out I can. Lying in bed together. Chun mumbles. I'm sleepy. Shon chuckles. Congratulations. Same here. Chun sighs. This is all your fault. He shifts, pressing his forehead into Shon's shoulder. Take responsibility. Sean hums. Don't care. Chun mutters something under his breath. Voice barely above a whisper. Weird. But now it feels like you only smell like me. The next day, Sean talks to his uncle on the phone. His uncle asks, "Why'd you change your mind? Weren't you planning to drop out? Do you even realize how much noise your grandmother made?" He adds, "When I get to Korea, I'll stop by to check on you." Sean tenses. "That's not an option. I live with a roommate now." His uncle hesitates. "Since when?" Sean cuts him off. "Just don't come. No matter what." Then he hangs up. At home, Chun watches Sean in silence. Something feels off. He wonders if he did something wrong again. Sean sets the table. As they eat, he sighs contentedly. "If I'd known about your cooking skills earlier, I would have loved you even more. I adore homemade food." He takes another bite. "I can literally feel my body healing." He grins. "I'd love to live like this forever." He glances at Chun. "If we get married, will you cook for me every day?" Chun doesn't answer. Instead, he says, "We need to buy a new mattress." Sean pauses, his grin fading. "In this situation, I wouldn't dare ask the questions I really don't want the answers to." Chun made him breakfast, and now he's talking about changing the bed. Sean swallows. "Did I drunkenly ask him out last night?" Chun, on the other hand, really doesn't like where this is going. He wants to grab Sean by the collar and demand an explanation. But what if his suspicions are right? Worst case scenario, he'd have to leave. But, does he even have anywhere to go? He has no friends who could take him in. His family home isn't an option either. After everything that happened, he still feels uncomfortable around his parents. And he hasn't found a new place yet. So he decides, "I'll just go along with dating Sean. After all, summer courses will be over soon." But does Sean really see them as newlyweds? They only started getting close after the first presentation. Why hurt myself emotionally for no reason? He struggles to bring up the question for a long time. Life is good. So maybe it's better to just pretend nothing happened. Sean breaks the silence. "How long has it been since you last slept properly?" Chun blinks. "I slept yesterday." Sean shakes his head. "I mean, when did your insomnia start?" Chun exhales. "The symptoms started in elementary school. But a few years later, it became chronic." Sean leans back, studying him. "And yet, despite everything, you still grew up relatively healthy." He pauses, deep in thought. "This is my chance." He grins. "I'm just curious. That's all. After all, we're in a pretty weird relationship."